Welcome to Vegas Circle Podcast with your hosts, Paki and Chris. We are people who are passionate about business, success, and culture. And this is our platform to showcase the people in our city who make it happen. On today's podcast, we're going to be sitting down with a powerhouse attorney who specializes in immigration and personal injury. So we finally get to sit down with the founder of Meesha Moulton Law Group. We got Miss Meesha Moulton. So welcome to the Circle.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So glad we could make this happen.
Yeah. So a lot of crazy things happening in the world with immigration, which we'll jump into. But kind of want to first start off with just kind of a little bit of your background. So originally from Toronto, Canada.
Yes.
So I got to mess with you a little bit. Are you a Drake fan at all? Or?
I am definitely a Drake fan.
Okay.
I have not turned my back on him.
Okay. Okay.
I feel like you can appreciate a little bit of Kendrick's music, right? Without just completely hating on Drake.
Of course.
Yeah, you can't just forget right away.
I mean, you can't deny Drake is still very
1,000%.
talented,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about, especially with the law background, what do you have to say about with him suing, Universal Music Group and Spotify and all of that stuff? Have you looked into that at all? Or?
Yeah, I haven't really looked into it too much, but just
Okay.
on its face, I can't imagine it really goes anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
For
It's
sure.
just like the aspect of just putting out like a diss track. He did the same. His just didn't
1000%.
hit the same.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
He wished it did, but it didn't work that way.
Exactly.
1000%.
So
Yeah.
I don't think he'd be suing if it was getting Kendrick Lamar's type of attention.
1,000%. Yeah. So what brought you to Las Vegas from Toronto?
So I went to law school at Michigan State,
Mm-hmm.
and then after Michigan State, I basically just, from Toronto, packed up my car, moved there. And then I was kind of at a crossroads where I'm like, okay, do I stay in Michigan? Do I go back to Toronto?
Yeah.
And then at that point, I was like, I am incredibly tired of starting my car in the morning.
Sound like Chris and
Yeah, I knew that
both.
feeling. That was
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And, cleaning it off and driving through a snowstorm, that white knuckle
Agreed.
driving. And I was like,
I
I
agree.
want to go somewhere warm.
Yeah.
And California was just so saturated and so expensive,
Yeah.
where I kind of narrowed my list down to Vegas and Phoenix. So
Yeah.
I wish there was like a better story behind it. but-
100%. Yeah.
So I packed up my car again with whatever fit inside of it and then moved to Vegas.
You've been trying to make that decision. Vegas, for like personal injury, I'm assuming it's a pretty high market, at least what I would guess. But was kind of the process to go automatically into personal injury and immigration, or did it kind of develop into that?
So it kind of just developed into it. Honestly, I moved out here with like zero plan. Like if I'm being completely honest, I kind of moved out here where I was like, okay, I'm going to sign up to take the bar in Nevada. And then I'm going to just from there try to find a job after the bar exam is all over with. And then I kind of fell into personal injury. So my experience beforehand was in corporate law.
Okay.
I've kind of done a lot of contract law. And
That's got to be crazy in
Yeah.
Las Vegas. I can't even imagine. Yeah.
for sure. And then, it was a lot of people who know me and know the story of how I kind of ended up out here. It was a little bit crazy, but I didn't know anything about Vegas. So I moved out here with like $3,000. I stayed at Green Valley Ranch for like 3 days. And I was like, I don't think that $3,000 is going to take me.
It's going to go quick. Yeah. It's going to go real
Especially
quick.
that
Yeah.
hotel.
Especially,
So
yeah.
I'm like over here and I'm, on Google trying to find cheaper options of where I can stay while I have to study for the bar exam, which is like a 2-month process before I can even apply for a job. And of course, nobody's going to give you an apartment without a job. So
100%. Yeah.
I find myself like a budget weekly type situation. But then I had no idea what Boulder Highway was and what it consisted of.
Yeah.
And that's where I ended up.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
I think I probably know the one too.
Yeah. Well, that was a little rough. A little rough. Yeah.
So for 2
Yeah.
months, I stayed at the Seagull Suites and I studied the bar exam.
Yeah.
I took the bar exam, and while I was waiting for my results, I started applying for jobs. Got a couple of job offers, took a job in personal injury law, and started from the bottom.
That's a great story. Was it tough?
Quote Drake.
Yeah. You say, what do you say, quote Drake? Oh,
Drake,
that's a shout out to Drake again.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
And when you get a job going into, working for somebody else as a lawyer, how long do you have to go through that process before you're able to, open up your own law firm? Or how does that kind of educational period look like?
It's kind of funny because it's like there's no like real formula for it. There's a lot of people that come out of school right away and they decide that they're going to work for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of other people who will go and work for a large firm and then decide like in a couple of years that they want to try to venture out on their own. For me, I just felt like I wanted to kind of put in my time and really learn the ins and outs of like a large practice law firm.
Yep.
And so I put in 8 years, and I started off as, basically like a legal assistant because I wasn't licensed to be an attorney yet. And then as soon as I was licensed, I was an associate attorney. Worked my way to managing attorney, and then I was the first ever partner at that firm for 3 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then went through COVID, which was kind of like an unprecedented situation. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I feel like, I've got some years under my belt and some good experience, and it's time for me to take this
to do a leap. Yeah.
And start making some decisions for myself. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say? I mean, the current administration is kind of crazy. We won't get too political, but what's your perspective on kind of the current administration in as far as immigration and what we're kind of dealing with right now? What's kind of your perspective on that?
It's like, how much time do we have?
I know.
Yeah,
I
that's
know it's a layered question. Yeah, it's a layered
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
I actually just did an interview on this earlier today, and
Okay.
I think because immigration's just been such a hot topic, and my perspective that I kind of explained to that news channel earlier today was just, I think that, I understand that we are kind of tired of certain things happening at the borders and, certain individuals with criminal records in this country that are undocumented. But I think that the immigration system is just kind of incredibly stigmatized by the media. And I think that if people actually took the opportunity to educate themselves, they would know that it's incredibly difficult to, go through the path of naturalization and get to that, that standpoint. And these people are very well vetted. And so in the grand scheme of things, yes, there are people who are, committing crimes that shouldn't be here. But overall, we're dealing with people who are just looking at a second chance at life.
Yep.
A better opportunity for their families. And, most of them are good law-abiding citizens that contribute to society. And I think that they're entitled to due process, just like our Constitution intended. So.
Yeah, and what do you see like the biggest, the top immigration issues that you're seeing, being immigration law? Is it, a risk of deportation, or is it that you're dealing with mostly people trying to get that citizenship?
So, my practice up until this point has been people just trying to get that citizenship, right? Like, my job is to help facilitate individuals to get to that path of citizenship. The problem that we're kind of coming across now is like, we should be promoting individuals to go through the process the correct way. But now people are kind of living in this fear and this uncertainty. So what I'm noticing a lot the last couple of months is I'm sitting down for consultations, I'm explaining what the next steps are, and people are just really worried and concerned. Even the ones that have very, an easier way or an easier method of obtaining that citizenship or that permanent residency, they're still afraid because they don't know if the laws are going to change on them tomorrow. So I'm hoping that, we eventually get to a point where we can kind of come to a middle ground, because I think that regardless of what side of politics you kind of fall on, I think everybody wants safer borders. I think everybody wants, good law-abiding citizens in this country. But I think that we can't take away people's basic rights in the process of accomplishing that.
Yeah, how do you kind of mitigate some of those challenges? Because that would be my first thought, right? If I'm here and I'm, undocumented and I need help, right? I'd be afraid to do that. Like, I'd be afraid to reach out because now it maybe exposes that or puts it out in the open. Like, how do you mitigate some of that risk for, a client that you're working with?
So, what I always explain to clients is, like, as much as it's, as much as somebody would like to be able to say that, your rights are, or you're not entitled to rights, or your rights are going to be taken away. If you are an undocumented individual, you still have the right to remain silent. You still have the right to an attorney. So it's just understanding how to navigate these types of processes and, understanding that individual's certain situation. And, I think the biggest issue that we're currently going through is during the campaigning, we were kind of told that the individuals that would be facing like this mass deportation would be people who have criminal records, right?
Yes,
and I don't think anybody was really against that. They're like, okay, well,
you have a criminal record?
Yeah, of course. Because if you have a criminal record, the chances of you actually going through the immigration process and being granted permanent residency and citizenship is slim to none. More
zero.
like none.
Yeah, probably zero. Yeah.
And so nobody really had a problem with that. I think the problem kind of began when that shifted and the criminality aspect just got attached to the undocumented status. So if you're here and you're undocumented, now you're immediately considered a criminal.
So the spotlight going back to your point about the media, the spotlight was all on that. And,
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I think that's what we're currently dealing with. And there's different legislation being put in place. But, we don't really have an idea of how it's all going to work and how it's all going to be funded. So there's a lot of questions that need to kind of come to light, I guess. Yeah.
There's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's so complex that I mean, it's hard to obviously put it in just one interview. That I know probably this is going to be something consistently you're going to be working on probably the next few years.
Yes.
It's like changing every day, right? It
is, yeah. So just going back, just so I can understand correctly. So if you are undocumented right now, there's a little bit of a delay period. Not, I don't want to say like a loophole, but they can come in and get a little bit of a delay on that. You can't just turn people in, or some people are just turning people in, right? That's the bad part. What you see with the media is they feel like people are just getting turned in, right?
Yeah. So, that's the problem is like the due process aspect.
The due process.
Right?
Okay. Yep.
So generally speaking, if in the past somebody was detained for any reason, they would still have the ability to go through the court system, and basically it would be decided if they're going to be deported or if they would have a chance at, gaining some kind of immigration status in the country. What's happening now, or I think what the overall goal is, especially with the Lake and Riley Act that was just passed, is that you can detain individuals for an indefinite period of time without that bail or due process aspect, and it could immediately be shifted to deportation. And we're talking like, these are not, kidnappers and murderers and people that are committing violent crimes. These are also individuals that are being caught for shoplifting and, petty crimes like that. So it's really just, a very one-size-fits-all type of response with the legislation that's passed.
How do you decide like what cases you want to take on, right? Because there's got to be a lot with a diverse city like Las Vegas. Like, how do you decide if it's immigration or personal injury? Like, okay, this is what I want to take on and represent.
So, my background comes from like a very high volume practice, and we would take a little bit of everything. And so the best way to kind of explain it was I dealt with everything from like tiny fender benders to extreme catastrophic accidents. And then my experience kind of shifted to just the catastrophic type of accidents and injuries. And then I realized when I went out on my own that, customer service is a really big aspect to me. And, there's a lot of attorneys in this town that have billboards that don't actually live here or go to the office. So
it's the marketing aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, it was one of those things where it's like, I want to be able to take a case, and if somebody wants to meet with me, call me, speak to me, they have access to that. So I kind of decide what cases to take just based on the facts. And, and from the immigration side of things, I think one of the big reasons I became an attorney is I was hearing these like horror stories from clients because, these are people who don't have a lot of money in the first place.
So just taking advantage, I already know where you're going. Yeah.
And then, they're spending $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. And sometimes they are, this is money that's been saved over their lifetime. They're borrowing it from other people. And, they've sat down with lawyers that are like, yes, absolutely, I can help you with your problem. I know within 10 minutes of sitting down with a client and hearing what their situation is in a consultation, if I can help them or not. And I turn away more people than what I take on. So, So
what's kind of some of those, sorry to cut you off, like what's some of those things that would turn you off to be able to say, no, I can't do this? Like,
so from the immigration side of things, it's really just the facts of the case, right? Like if you have like an extreme like if you have a criminal record, or if you you had like multiple entries without inspection, which is just basically, you know, you coming across the border, then you're not eligible for certain things. Okay. And so, you know, there's certain waivers that we can do. We can go through certain processes, but you know, I will be able to tell you if it's worth it or not. And the last thing I want to do is to be able to take your money and then 2 years
not even be able to help you. Yeah.
Say sorry, you know. So, and then from the personal injury side of things, also, it's kind of the facts of the case. Yeah. You know, if you have actual injuries and you have a good solid case where, you know, you need help, then I'm able to assist you, because sometimes there's those, you know, everyday, like I said, smaller cases that sometimes you can resolve on your own, or they don't result in real injuries.
Yeah. How do you balance? How do you balance that with, you know, the goal of any business, whether you're a lawyer or any business, is to grow it, right, and try to get, you know, to a point where you are kind of high volume, right? I would assume that's kind of like the opportunity that you're looking for. But how do you balance growth with that customer service and, you know, that declining of certain cases? Because whether it's an easy case or a hard case, that's still part of that growth pattern in a sense. You know, how do you kind of navigate that part? You know, the business aspect along with, you know, the personal aspect of how you want to conduct yourself.
So I think the biggest thing for me has been just making sure that I hire people that have like a very similar mindset. And so, you know, I've been guilty in the past of hiring individuals quickly because I needed the help, you know, and I realized that it's like that hire slow process actually just works so much better, because then I have people who want to grow with the company. You know, they are looking at, you know, just not looking at it like a job. They really want to participate in the growth. And so I think that has been like a really big part of it for me. And then, you know, finding like-minded attorneys as well to kind of add to that equation.
Sure.
And as much as you want to grow, you don't want to do it in the wrong way, right? Yeah. Because the last thing, so me declining a case during a consultation and someone maybe not necessarily being happy about that is a lot better than me taking on a case and, you know, having to withdraw after a year. You know, after an individual has significant medical bills and they've invested time. And I'm not saying, you know, of course that happens. It's not like there's situations where it never happens, but I'm saying that if you can limit that aspect in the beginning, then I prefer to go down that road. So
that makes sense, because like usually like for personal injury, like isn't it part of a lot of time you're doing the work up front for no cost? Like the goal is to get the money on the back end. So if you feel like if there's an opportunity we're going to lose heavily, then you might have no option, right? Is that how it usually works?
Yeah, exactly. So everything for us is contingency fee basis.
Got it.
So we are always making money on the back end. So we basically get paid the same time that the client gets paid, and you know the providers that they treated with get paid. So that's how that usually works.
When you're trying to build a practice like that, it seems expensive up front, right? Because you're really doing, you could go a year and not really see a lot of income if you take a lot of cases that are going to be, you know, higher dollar value cases or larger litigation cases. Wouldn't it take a lot longer to get that money up front? Like how challenging was that to build that practice out?
It's, you know, there's a reason I waited 8 years.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
to open my own practice. Yep. And it's definitely, you know, a personal injury practice, any law firm really, but definitely a personal injury practice where you're not making any money up front, and there's a very heavy investment on the front end. So, you know, you have to take that into consideration and know when you're ready to make that investment. And it might not be able to see money for a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be.
That's wild. As far as like what happens behind the scenes, right? Like we see a lot of drunk driving accidents here, right? So like, what's the best thing to do with contacting you? Like, how would you walk somebody through the process of, you know, reaching out to your law firm, you know, dealing with a drunk driver accident or just a regular accident? Like, what really happens behind the scenes of how that process takes out?
So I'm usually contacted mostly via phone, but I do get contacted through social media a lot, through my website as well, and then you're scheduled for a consultation. That consultation usually happens in the office, but if you require me to come out and meet you, happy to do that as well. I usually come out with like a legal assistant, so we basically just, help facilitate that aspect as much as possible. We sit down, we go over the facts of your case, and then collect all the information. So what I tell people all the time is if you're involved in an accident, you want to make sure that you are collecting everything you possibly can. So the other individual's license information, any police report information, police reports, pictures, videos. So we collect all of that during the intake process. And then we decide right then and there if we're going to at least take it under investigation. And then if I decide to take it, we sign up the client. And then the first 30 days of the case is really us trying to investigate, try to confirm coverage, which is making sure that the person who hit you actually had active insurance, which you'll be surprised at the amount of times that
do not,
doesn't.
Right? Yeah.
And then after the coverage part of it, then it's the liability aspect, which is the two insurance companies usually battling it out, trying to figure out, who's at fault. And if they decide, if both people are at fault, then to what extent.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. How do you feel about like the dash cams driving around and having those in your car? Is that a good recommendation? That's a good thing to do or not?
So I actually did a video, like a social media reel on dash cams. And
did you? Okay.
Okay. And I think, it got like a lot of traction because people were like, I didn't really think of it.
Yeah.
I was like, I think dash cams are great. So they're not great when you're at fault, but
that's a very good point. Yeah.
But they're definitely great in any other situation where it's like you're trying to tell a story, you got hit by someone, it's video evidence.
You can show proof easy to be able to see it.
Exactly. So any kind of proof, any kind of evidence that helps to support your claim. And like dash cam right now, I think is like the ultimate type of evidence. So I highly recommend them.
I just saw that video of, I think it was on the highway went real viral was the dash cam where they just are stopped on the freeway and then they literally just pull back and slam into the car and then get back. Like, so it made me think about like the dash cam. Like you feel like everything is camera active where you just got to be watching everything at all times, which is crazy. Crazy world we're living in.
Yeah. And I think that was like a situation of like a staged accident. I remember seeing that on TikTok. And, and then that's a perfect example where she was really lucky that she had a dash cam. So, if
show proof right there.
Exactly. Easy purchase on any, Best Buy, Amazon, anything like that. So,
and if you are, say, hypothetically, you are at fault, can your dash cam get subpoenaed in that process, or like, is it always just fair game at that point if you have a dash cam?
I mean, yes, absolutely. If they know you have a dash cam, any evidence like that can definitely be called on. Yeah.
Like before you settle with an insurance company, what's like the best way to like you would recommend to kind of handle, like what would you do with the process of that before trying to settle?
So what we do is we have to send the client to treatment, right?
Okay.
And then so they sign up with me, they have injuries, and then I send them out to medical providers based on, the type of injuries that they're saying they have. And then from there, I let the doctors manage everything. Okay. So the doctors are the experts. I'm the expert at the actual case side of things. I'm working on that with my team, and then they're directing the treatment. So once they are done treating and they are basically back to normal or as close to it as possible, then we collect the medical records and bills from each one of the providers, put it together in this neat little package called the demand. And then we send that out to the insurance company, and basically it just kind of highlights what the individual's injuries were, what kind of treatment they received to address those injuries, and then how much it cost, and then what I'm looking for to try to settle the claim.
Okay.
And then I give them usually 2 weeks or so to review that information before they contact me with an offer, and then that kind of starts like the negotiation aspect.
Yeah. That's probably the hardest part of it, right? Is dealing with the insurance companies, because it feels like their biggest thing is trying to not pay for anything, right?
Right.
So it's the battle of dealing with insurance. Is that the most frustration part of your job, or is that not something?
I think that's kind of like the most fun part of my job.
Okay.
I love battling with insurance companies.
Because having the lawyer mind, I get it.
So,
Yeah.
For me, it's like, I enjoy the challenge, and sometimes their reasoning for making a low offer or for denying liability is just so ridiculous. So I just instantly know I'm like, this one's going to litigation. So
okay,
yeah. So
most don't go to litigation, right? It takes most of them are just settled and cut the check and done, right?
Yeah, I settle probably like 85% of my cases.
Okay, that's what I've heard. Okay,
and then I'd say 10 to 15% actually end up going to litigation. And then even within the litigation process, right? It's such a small percentage of that that's actually going to end up going to one of my trial attorneys.
Okay. Yeah.
And does that process, are you seeing that get more frequent now? Like with especially insurance premiums going up, insurance companies losing a ton of money? Like are you starting them to start push back a little bit more than they used to?
You know, it's kind of funny. It's like a combination, right? It's some insurance companies, and I feel like they kind of go through waves. Some insurance companies become a lot tougher and they're like denying everything. And then other insurance companies are like, you know, let's try to get this resolved and try to stay out of court. Because, I mean, when expenses are raised on one side, it usually means expenses are also getting raised on the other side, too.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah. How do you break barriers with being in such like a male-dominated industry of the lawyers? How do you deal with that aspect of it and keeping yourself right and mindset right?
You know, I think that's just like a continuous, everyday, like hurdle that, you know, that I'm going to have to kind of overcome. I think that as a woman in the industry, you know, and I hope we get to a point where it's just normal, right? We're seeing just as many women lawyers as there are male attorneys. And when I say, you know, women who own law firms and who are out there advertising but until that point, I think it's just, you know, one of those things where you got to kind of prove yourself a little bit more. And as much as we've made some really, you know, we've taken some serious forward steps, I think that it's just one of those things that's still, you know, I'm still battling like the old white male and his experience, and that's just, you know, how it goes. Yeah, exactly. So I have to fight a little bit harder and work a little bit harder, but that's not a problem. So
good stuff. Yeah, good mindset on there. So for business advice, kind of after leaving the law firm, you were working in kind of corporate law on that line for about 8 years. What's one piece of advice that you would recommend somebody that's just starting out, whether it's, you know, maybe starting their own law firm or maybe just starting their own business, you know, just in general? What's one piece of advice you can share with them?
So I would say, you know, I think overthinking is probably one of the biggest culprits of why people don't actually pursue what they're passionate about. Because I always say from the idea to the actual execution of it, most people are going to overthink themselves out of the idea altogether. So what works for me is between my idea and my execution, there's a very limited time. And so, you know, my mindset is like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, I am not going to regret just going for it, because I know the type of person I am. I'm incredibly disciplined. I'm going to put in 110%. And if you're willing to do that, and you're willing to suffer through the pain of discipline and put in 110%, you know, and if it works out great for you, perfect. You didn't overthink yourself out of it, right? But even if it doesn't work for some reason, and the next idea works, you're never going to regret just going for it.
I love that. Yeah,
that's great.
That's something we deal with all the time. They're overthinking and trying to just get through it and make a decision. But I love that, because it's like we only have one life to live. It's like make the decision and go for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think our brains are kind of wired to just always focus on everything that can go wrong. Yeah, you know.
I'm sorry.
One later question on top of that. You know, being a lawyer, do you think you're naturally inclined to be a business owner? Like, I feel like I always see a ton of lawyers become business owners, either, you know, on a partnership side, investment side, or even their own businesses. Like, do you think you're naturally inclined to do that?
You know, it's kind of funny. It's like almost the opposite in some aspects, because it's like I feel like some of the people who are really great attorneys, like I mean like truly good trial lawyers that I know, will tell you that they're not great business owners. So it's just, I think sometimes it's, you know, your strength is in one or the other. But, you know, I think most lawyers are just very driven, very type A individuals.
That makes sense, yeah.
So you tend to see them a lot more in, you know, those business settings. So.
How long did it take you, like, did you know you wanted to have your own law firm at one period, or would you, when you were working for the other firm, something clicked where you were like, okay, I could do this, like I could do this better, or you know what I mean? Like, when did it click for you in that 8-year period?
I didn't really go into it thinking like I'm for sure going to have my own law firm and work for myself. I think that, that's always kind of a goal. Who doesn't want to work for themselves? But I was very open to working in a different, like in a law firm setting with someone else if it worked out. But my experience kind of showed me that where I want to head with my career and the type of service that I want to provide to my clients and the type of cases that I want to work on just kind of clashed a little bit. And, that's perfectly fine. I think people have like different mindsets and different goals.
Sure. Yeah.
And, I enjoy making money as much as the next person, but there's also a portion of my business that I would love to be able to kind of introduce like a immigration, human rights, nonprofit element to it.
Oh, awesome.
So I'm actually taking a course in London in the summertime on that human rights aspect too, just to kind of help guide me in that direction. So, and I think, it doesn't hurt. I think that it's, just something that I'm passionate about. I feel like I've grown to this extent already at my age, and I feel like I'm in a position where I'm grateful and I want to be able to give back as much as possible.
That's good. And that's going to open up a whole different mindset of learning that aspect of it. It's wild.
Yeah, I just have a 6-year-old that's currently in private school.
Okay.
So
that adds up. I get it. I get it. Yeah.
I got to make sure, get her all set up before.
That's right.
Before I start taking like a little bit of a step back and taking more of those types of cases.
100%. Good for you. Yeah, awesome. We always ask guests about, we're some of the best food in Vegas.
Yeah.
I've heard Toronto's got excellent food.
It does.
For sure. But what's your favorite restaurant in Vegas?
I love Limoncello.
Limoncello's very good. Yes. Yeah.
I know the owner.
Sahara, right?
On Sahara.
Yes. Been there multiple
if you're
times.
looking for great Italian food, that is the place to go.
They actually have really good service there.
They have amazing service, great food, a good cocktail menu. So,
it's funny. I just remembered that was the first restaurant we went to, I think, during the pandemic, right? It was in there. Yeah, it was one of the first ones we went when the pandemic was going on. With the masks and everything. It was like the first restaurant we actually went to.
Oh, funny!
We saw everybody with the masks and taking them off, and it was funny. But I forgot the owner's name. There, he's a great guy. I'm trying to remember.
Giuseppe.
Very nice guy. Yeah. Shout out to them. Great food. I don't think anybody's mentioned that before. So shout out to them.
Yeah. They great food. They have like really fresh food. I think they like fly in some of the fish on a regular basis. So. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. Yeah.
That's a gem. Yeah, good stuff. I love seafood and Italian food. I would assume, the next step is you taking a class. But is there anything we forgot to ask you that you want to leave us out on? Or
no, we could be here for.
I know with the layers, with the immigration stuff.
So there's so much going on in the world, and
100%.
I always just tell everybody. I think the last note I'll kind of leave off on is like. Just question what you read and don't take everything at face value. I think that's really what it kind of comes down to is like one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite songs is like we chase misprinted lies. And
strong statement.
So I think that's the biggest thing is just like if you're being told something because when we read history books and we look back at what happened in the past, sometimes we're sitting there questioning like, how did anybody ever let this happen? Yeah. I feel like we're kind of living in that time right now.
I'm glad. That's great. I was just talking to my father earlier, and I'll just say this. He was saying, like, do your own research.
Yeah.
Like, stop listening to other folks and just, following everybody. Do your own research and actually see if that's the truth. Stop just, you got to have fact check stuff. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, that's good.
Agreed.
Yeah. Especially being in your field. I know you get a lot of folks who fact check stuff.
So I used to not always listen to the news because it was kind of like my way of staying in ignorance bliss.
Yeah.
But now, practicing immigration law and with all the changes, I have to watch the news and drink my coffee.
Yeah, 100%. I can't even imagine. Yeah. It's wild. So, well, we appreciate you sitting down with us. What's some of your social handles people can reach out to you on?
So my main one is Meesha_Moulton Law. Okay. And that's my Instagram. I'm also on TikTok under Vegas Attorney. Okay. And then you can go to my website, which is MeeshaMoultonLaw.com. Awesome. And you can give me a call.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate you hanging out with
Yes.
us, man. Definitely check us out at vegascircle.com. And I forgot to shout out Brand Bomb for connecting us. So they're in the building. So I appreciate Alexis and Tyler. And Lindsay I've known forever. So shout out to Lindsay. She's not here with us, but appreciate Brand Bomb for connecting us. So
yeah, absolutely.
thanks for your time, and check us out at vegascircle.com.
Yeah,
thanks a lot.
Thank you, Meesha.
Good stuff.
you.
Yeah.